think we can go ahead and get started. I'll start reading the guidelines as folks come in, but welcome to folks who have joined so far. I'm calling the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization UPWP committee meeting to order. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. You can use the mute and unmute button to either mute or unmute yourself. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button or the reactions button, and then the chair will call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have technical difficulties, please contact Srilekha Murthy via the chat box or by email at smurthy@ctps.org. I'll now read the accessibility statement. This meeting is being recorded. Meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in the meeting, please contact Srilekha Murthy of MPO staff via the chat box or at smurthy@ctps.org. Thank you. So with that, I think we can move on to a quick roll call of members who are present. My name is Derek Cravat, manager of MPO activities at MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning and committee chair. I'll just go down the list here. MAPC. Don't see Eric on yet. Town of Arlington, Dan Amstutz.
Yep, Daniel Amstutz, Town of Arlington here.
City of Boston, Transportation Department. None. City of Framingham. Town of Medway. City of Newton.
David Kozis, Newton Public Works Department.
Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing Trick.
Good morning. City of Somerville. RTAC.
Diggins Advisory Council here.
Sounds good. And I see Eric Barassa has joined, so.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with MAPC.
Eric. Is there any other members on that I may have missed? Don't see any. So I think with that, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is public comments. Are there any members of the public that wish to make a comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, if you do have any comments, you can use the raise hand function anytime during the meeting and I'll call on you. And if you have any written comments, you can provide a copy to staff emailing smurthy@ctps.org. So the next item is summary of the November 18th, 2021, I should say 2022 meeting, or wait, I think we did these last time, is that correct?
That's correct. My apologies. It's the April 28th, 2022 meeting.
Okay, right. Sorry, I was reading the slide, not the chair's memo here. So yes, we'll ask for a motion and second to approve the meeting summary from April 28th, 2022.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Eric?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments, questions on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. MassDOT votes yes. Eric?
Yes.
Daniel Amstutz?
Yes.
David Kozis?
David Kozis, yes.
Tom O'Rourke?
Yes.
Lynn Diggins?
Diggins, yes.
Great. And I see Tom Bent has joined as well. Tom, did you want to take a quick vote on the minutes?
I should. Yep. Aye.
Okay.
Sorry, had a little technical difficulties getting on this morning.
No worries, thank you. Okay, so that motion passes. Minutes are endorsed. So with that, I think we can move right on to the, or do we have more meeting minutes to, or so I think we can move on to the discussion. Great, so with this, I'll hand it over to Srileka and Sandy to get into the discussion on the universe of proposed study. We'll pick up where we left off last time, going through the universe of proposed projects.
Yes, just give me one quick second to pull that up. Apologies for the background noise. Someone has decided to start vacuuming. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. So at the last meeting, we left off after project T1, flexibly fixed bus route service. So we're going to jump right in with T2, the transit modernization program. This proposal was submitted by MassDOT's Office of Transportation Planning and is a continuation of the previous year's project. So with that, I'll pass it on to Sandy. If you could please speak to a bit of the background of the project and what are the goals.
Yeah, and Derek, please feel free to jump in as well, since your office submitted this. But I think many of you know that a few years ago we put aside some money in the UPWP to develop the Community Connections program as part of the long-range transportation plan. We did that over a course of a couple of years at a relatively low budget, and I was the primary staff person on that at the time. And it was a good idea to put aside some money for it to help kind of develop what that program was going to look like. It's a funding program within the TIP, but it needed a lot of definition. And I think OTP has identified here that there's a need to put aside some staff time, attention, and resources to do the same thing for the transit modernization program, which is going to be in the TIP starting in 2025. And the amount of money that is proposed here is significantly higher than it was for the Community Connections program, which I think is appropriate, both because the transit modernization program is going to be larger. It's going to be $5.5 or so million per year as opposed to $2 million for the Community Connections program. But also because, frankly, the amount of money we allocated for Community Connections development was inadequate and led to a number of problems in the development process for that program. So this could be a discrete study. It could be a budget line within the long-range transportation plan, and that's something that we'll be discussing as staff. But I think it's a good thing to put on the table as something that we need to be planning for starting in fiscal year 23, because that's 2 years before we anticipate launching the transit modernization program, and that's the same timeline we had for Community Connections development. So Derek, if you want to add anything that from the OTP perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a good summary. I'll just add that just to echo that a lot of the work that goes into these programs is because there's a lot of administrative legwork and building kind of program guidelines, and if there's any competitive component to it, looking at things like evaluation criteria, or even if it's not competitive, thinking about how to rank projects. And so I think there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into making these kinds of programs happen. And so that was just kind of the motivation behind this one, is that having a dedicated line in the UPWP, and like Sandy said, it doesn't have to be discrete, it could be under, but as long as it's budgeted for, I think that was the kind of rationale for recommending this one, just to put in the due diligence to make sure the program is ready to launch in the year it's in the TIP. So I see Len and then Daniel.
Thank you. Well, this isn't a discrete study. I mean, I strongly feel that it should be a line item in the LRTP. This is essentially funding a staff position, a it's just not a study. And so I'd be hard pressed to recommend this as a study, or something that, given the funds that are so limited for us doing real research. Granted, I really think this should be done, but just funded some other way. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Daniel?
Thanks. I guess I would be inclined to agree with Len, but I'm not 100%. Yeah, I think that makes sense of sort of the purpose of it. But my question is more about, I'm trying to remember now how long ago that we put in a line item for transit modernization in the tip, in future years. Was there, I'm trying to remember what were specific conversations about, like what was supposed to, that, there's some, I only have a vague idea of sort of what that's supposed to encompass. So anyway, so I'm just trying to understand, we sort of go back to like, what was what was the original purpose? Like, I agree with it. I think it's a good idea, but it's like, I think I understand that the goal is to flesh it out and, make it clear, like what it actually is meant to go in there. So, but I guess just my main question is sort of what was, remind me what the impetus of it was and how that might form what the guidelines become.
Do you want to address that, Sandy? Or...
I think there are actually probably people here who are better qualified to answer that question than I am.
Okay.
I don't know if that's Annette or Tegan or someone, because honestly, I have not been part of all of those discussions about what it's forming, what the intention is in the LRTP. I do think that the kind of one of the core questions that we need to answer is that, relative to the capital needs of transit in this region, $5.5 million a year is not a huge amount of money. And so where is the best bang for the buck in investing those funds? But I want to invite anybody else from CTPS who wants to kind of weigh in on those discussions. Or I see Eric was waving his hand, so maybe he wants to say something.
Well, I feel like the genesis of this was, it did come out of the last long range transportation plan. And we had a lot of public comment about, about public transportation and focusing on that. And obviously, the focus of the TIP funds tend to be, because they're highway funds, tend to be on kind of roadway projects, although we do, and we've historically and doing more so flexing, funds to transit. And so this was an attempt, I think, to carve out a little bit of money to say, let's try to focus strategically on improving, public transportation, particularly, I think, kind of the MBTA. And I think there was a sense that we wanted to, like, well, I don't know if we put we didn't put geographic bounds on it, but I think there was a sense that we wanted to sort of make strategic improvements that were about modernizing the system. I know there was a lot of discussion about improving, access to commuter rail stations and upgrading stations to be accessible. And again, $5 million is not a lot of money when you look at the expense of MBTA infrastructure. But I think that was the genesis of this, was to carve out some money to be able to improve sort of strategic investments in public transit across the system. I just, while I have the floor for a second, I feel like if we want to continue that and be serious about this program, I think we actually do need to invest some staff time in working with the T, because it's not a significant amount. I mean, to be like 100% frank, like it's not such a significant amount of money that the T is going to invest tons and tons of staff time into this. They have, so much need, and just, Jillian's not here, but like, there's just so many other projects. And so I think that if we are serious about it, I think we need to say, are we like, let's actually invest the staff time to working with the T and identifying what would be a project where we felt that $5 million was really, doing something that might not have been done otherwise, because otherwise I could see the T coming forward and say, well, we've got a $20 million station upgrade. Why don't you just throw that $5 million into that? And I don't know if that will feel the same as opposed to saying like, well, we heard that there was a commuter rail station that didn't have, some aspect to it that that we felt that this would not have been sort of done otherwise. But I think we have to invest the staff time to kind of flesh it out. Otherwise, it either won't be utilized in the way that we kind of wanted it to be. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, go ahead, Len.
And I agree with Eric, and so, I mean, I really do want to see this work done, but I can imagine us trying to like craft another FTE position for the MPO staff. And this wouldn't be enough, I think, for that position, but it could be like part of what that person does, and it does it on an ongoing basis, along with other things. And so I'm saying the load can come back to us, but like given other studies that they could give us like some real research, I just hate to see 75K that could go to those, go to this. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out a couple of other things that I think might be relevant to this conversation. The first is, Len, I hear what you're saying, and I think that's, definitely something we should consider. I do want to point out that to some extent, especially given that our planning budget will be expanding in fiscal year 23, these funds are kind of fungible, where it lives under what label it lives under, it's still all funds that are going to be spent by MPO staff. So I think, we can discuss whether this is going to be LRTP or a discrete study or whatever, but the funds can and do get moved around between the different programs. They're all the same funds. Also, I think one thing that I remember that I want to point out about transit modernization is that part of what we as staff have been anticipating will go into the program is some of the stuff that already lives under community connections, right? Under community connections, we're already funding several transit upgrade type things, or have tried to fund several transit upgrade type things that we would like to see ending up going into that transit modernization program. So, we've laid some of the groundwork already, but I do think that I really respect Eric's point about needing to work with the T and potentially with the other RTAs as well, to really make sure that we're actually meeting their needs and fitting into their processes.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, it sounds like this will be a good fit maybe for the LRTP or even the TIP task. I think I could see it because of the connection to the TIP. I'm sure part of this might just involve identifying what the best candidates are for flexing to FTA, which isn't a ton of, I mean, that might not take as much coordination work. I think the coordination work might be like what Eric was saying about identifying good candidate projects. And if there is going to be a competitive aspect to this, that needs to be, I think, fleshed out and determined, and that might require more staff time. But yeah, Laura Gilmore.
Hi, everyone. I know there's a lot of people I know on this call, but just wanted to note that I'm here in a different capacity today now with the T. So Eric, I just wanted you to know that there is someone from the T present today and listening to this conversation, and happy to continue the conversation.
Welcome back, Laura. You're with the T
Great
now.
to be with you all again.
What is your position with the T?
I am the new Director of Strategic Transit Planning.
Congratulations. That's
Excellent.
Phenomenal. Oh, Laura, I'm so glad.
So Jillian and I are talking. She wasn't able to make this meeting, so I'll probably be at some meetings going forward, and we'll figure out that split.
That's great. Thank you.
Were you with Massport?
I was, and then I
Okay,
went to the
yeah.
feds, and
Yeah.
now
Great.
with the T.
Oh,
So glad to be back with this group.
excellent. Thanks.
Thanks, Laura. Any other comments on this one? I feel like we have a good kind of set of next steps here, so probably go ahead and move on to the next one.
Yeah, can move on. So moving into T3, this project is titled Opportunities for Bus Rapid Transit in the Boston region. This project was a staff generated study idea. And I will call on, well, I'm not seeing Paul Christner just at this moment. Would Annette or Tegan or Jonathan be willing to speak to this project?
I'm not sure. I think if Paul was supposed to speak to this, why don't we pause and wait and see if he can join us or come back to this? I think that would be more appropriate since neither of us were fully primed to sort of speak to this.
Yeah, Paul is on his way.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
we can come back to this if that's fine.
Thank you.
Right. So the next couple ones I was going to ask for Paul's input. So I'll just skip through.
Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the last section just for now, which is the transit equity category. So for the first, we have analyzing the environmental justice impacts of congestion pricing. This is also a staff generated study idea, and I will invite Mark Abbott to speak further on this project's background and concepts.
This is actually brought up by Ryan Hicks of our staff who does the CMP program monitoring. He's also one that's come up in the past that talked about the other congestion pricing studies that we've talked about in the past UPWP years. As you know, there's probably been a lot of work on how congestion pricing might work, the different aspects of it and everything, but this study would go into focus on how congestion pricing might impact EJ communities in our region. Because I think that's one of the things that Ryan thought that is kind of lacking in all the discussions that we're having with the discussion of congestion pricing, the different forms of it. But you know, how would this impact EJ communities? Would it put undue burdens on some of the communities, whether it's makes it too expensive for them to travel during peak periods, or whether it's moving different traffic or people into the communities or through their communities and impacting them that way type of thing. So this is to look on it on that take of it, as opposed to just looking at how we might get benefits from congestion pricing to fund different programs.
Yep, go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you. I would support this. I am glad we have something about congestion pricing proposed for this fiscal year. And I think if, this is certainly a concern that has been brought up, and I think it would be really helpful to have this analysis. So I think this is very important to continue to try to advance the conversation about the issue of congestion pricing.
I guess although, yeah, I just want to kind of try to articulate MassDOT's perspective here and say that, I think there's clear recognition that congestion pricing has benefits and has, worked where it's been implemented successfully. I will just say that because of the kind of policy surrounding it and who is ultimately making decisions, and the current administration, being pretty clear that they do not support congestion pricing and have kind of hinted at managed lanes being a more kind of preferable policy alternative, that I just want to be really clear about who the target audience for this study is, and for staff to think kind of critically about that, and whether, there should be investment in a study that is kind of more, I guess, hinges on a hypothetical policy decision as opposed to needs that we know are there currently right now. So I just kind of throw that onto the table for one perspective when we're thinking about this, but go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, that's fair enough, Derek. And I think we recognize where MassDOT's position is on this. Thank you. I think this is, an important thing to do if if we ever, as a region or a state advance the concept of congestion pricing. And I've always felt that, before you can even, get to a point of having a serious policy conversation about it, I think you do need to understand like what would be the level of pricing to to improve traffic conditions, and then understand what that impact would be on low income or environmental justice communities. So I think this is an important body of work to do if we ever advance the congestion pricing concept. There's such a chicken and egg situation, I feel like, with this one. Personally, MAPC, we're big supporters of the idea of congestion pricing, but I think we recognize that this is something that's not, this is an idea that will take a while to occur. And so, doing the kind of research to understand the idea better would be good. So, I think we support this, depending on, what the shape of it is. But I think this is an important element to understand what the impact would be, what the pricing level would be to actually have a significant, improvement in traffic conditions.
Eric. Yeah, Tom Bent.
Thank you. I agree with most of what Eric said. I mean, to me, it seems like we're ahead of ourselves here until we understand what the costs are and how that would be spread across, and who would be paying for that. This seems like it's a little bit ahead of that. Plus, I think it's obvious that this is going to have a negative impact on those communities. If people are going to have to pay more, that's obviously, going to be an issue. And then the other thing that I think is a real, reality of this is if people are going to, feel like they're being overcharged to drive on the highways or whatever, they're going to, try to find alternative routes, and it's going to be through a lot of these neighborhoods. So, I think we're a little ahead of ourselves. I'd like to see a more formal proposal that we can evaluate as to what the total costs are, what are they really talking about on this, and then take a look at what the impacts are. And then if it's not going to go anywhere under the current administration, don't we wait until there is change and then take a look at it. So this may be something we want to take a better look at next year once we have more information. But that's just where I am on this right now. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. David.
So I appreciate Tom's comment. So especially with alternate routes, if this is really about, it seems like one of the goals has to do with pollution reduction, right? Which seems like it would be the reverse if people start shifting to alternate routes. But when I first read this, I was kind of thinking, in addition to congestion pricing, just the all-day pricing and sort of the reverse situation that I think we still have, where some areas of Boston and Chelsea, I think, pay less, right? If you're residents of these EJ communities, to go, to use the Tobin Bridge or the tunnels. And so, that's already in place. I think it's still in place. So it makes me wonder, is that was really purely for a financial benefit for these residents, not really related, I don't think, to congestion or pollution. So I don't know where to go with this, but those were the thoughts that came to mind.
Thanks, David. Glenn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, they could shift to alternative routes. They could shift to alternative modes of transportation. Wouldn't it be lovely if they shifted to transit and because of congestion pricing? But we don't know, and that's what studies are all about. And so I hear concern, and my preference would be to see if we could find someone else to do the study, and would pay the staff to do it, because I think it's important to have this information sooner rather than later, because it can help us in terms of forming policy. I mean, to a certain extent, I feel that there's a credibility issue for us with respect to last year, because we said we were going to bring this forth this year. So it is in the universe. You could say, well, we've done, staff has done what it said it was going to do, to get into the universe. But I think we indicated to people we're going to do more than just get into the universe, And so I would say if we don't study it, we don't adopt the study, we need to have some plan for how we get this research done. So like I said, maybe find someone else to do the study and pay us, or maybe find some other group that's just going to do the study, and we try to work with them in order to try to get data like this and then some. So that's it. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, so can revisit. I think those are good perspectives and comments. Yeah, Sandy, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that, as you all know, based on our conversations the last meeting as well, we're not asking you to make decisions right now. Like we'll talk in a little bit about, next steps, and it'll be the same as it has been in past years with surveys and whatever. But we as staff are also happy to be directed to come back with more alternatives on this particular topic. The concepts that are in the universe do not have to be the ones that end up in the UPWP word for word. So please, I think we'll definitely take the feedback that's been given and use it to think about where this goes from here. But also please feel free to reach out if you'd like to talk to us about it more.
Thanks, Sandy. Great.
Okay, see. Okay, I think we have Paul, so we can move back to let's see. To T3, opportunities for bus rapid transit in the Boston region. Paul, could I invite you to speak on this?
Yeah, sorry, just unmuting. Good morning, everyone. So this project is proposing building on the, I think I'm going to mess up the acronym, ITDP project with the BRT lines, and also looking at some additional lines, ITDP, there it is. And it would, I can't see the budget. I think it's an $80,000 budget, and it would have a memo outlining potential new corridors and building on the other corridors, and focusing on benefits and impacts to environmental justice communities, and looking at economic development. I think we proposed a similar project last year, but this is a bit more specific in terms of building on the ITDP project and some of the previous work that's been done on this. So I don't know if there's any questions. And yes, it's going to use Conveil, I think, to look at some of the access, additional access as well.
So yep, I see some hands up. So Daniel.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand, how does this fit in with the bus network redesign and sort of the high frequency corridors that are proposed as part of that? Are these, ITTP is this idea about like gold standard BRT and that sort of thing. And is this trying to get further towards that? So yeah, how are those things connected?
So I think that's a great question. I think we would need to obviously meet with the T and talk to them about how this would fit together. I mean, this is, I don't think the bus network redesign is including any specific BRT routes. I know there's a lot of bus lanes and, reorganization of some of the routes, but in terms of the BRT, this is, I think, more like Silverline style or something like that. So it would, my understanding is it would sort of be in addition to bus network redesign, but we would absolutely need to work with the T and talk to them about how it would fit together, because I think it's a bus network redesign is a multi-year implementation, so we want to work with them.
Okay, thanks.
Daniel, Eric?
I have a similar question, Paul. Do you envision this sort of as an evaluation of the existing sort of bus priority corridors, or is this a look at potential new ones?
I think this is mainly looking at potential new ones.
Okay.
Because when I'm pretty sure the ITDP project really was looking at, like I said, Silverline style, like BRT, that's not just bus lanes, but actual sort of separated right of way, like, what Daniel was saying, gold standard BRT. So I think it's looking at sort of a step up from the bus lanes.
Yeah, I mean, I like this body of work. I also like that this is getting the staff a little bit more engaged in some of these other like lighter weight modeling tools. I don't know if Marty wants to speak to any of this, but I think that accessibility is like kind of an interesting metric to understand the impact of some of these things. Traditionally we look at like what's the demand and what's the ridership, but like job access to jobs, employers access to like workforce is another like important metric to understand the benefit of a transportation connection. So not only I think is this research great to better understand what certain corridors could do in terms of job access, benefits, or access to other important destinations, but I also think just strengthening like kind of the staff's like technical skills in this area could be good too.
Yeah, and we started to use Conveil, and I think it might be a good fit for looking at some of those access metrics and some of that analysis.
Great. Thank you. Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Love the study. Would love it more if someone else paid for it. So I see Lauren Gilmore next. So look at me, I'm pro transit, pro MBTA, but it just seems like I think it'd just really be good if we could get someone else to pay us to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Yeah, go ahead, Laura. I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah, okay.
I was just going to mirror what Daniel had said. He started to say the comment that I was going to make, which was just that the importance, if this study is one that moves forward, of aligning it with the bus network redesign is an important element. And, I think happy to have further conversation about this with staff at the T, but if this does move forward, I think that alignment may need to happen in the scope too, just to be clear about how the two fit together.
Yeah, and we'd certainly want to meet with you, Laura, and Caroline and team and everybody right up front to discuss that. So absolutely.
Great. And I am meeting with Caroline and OTP kind of separately about the universe, so I can get any input from her as the project manager for that bus network redesign, so we can pass along any comments she has as well. So yeah, I mean, just as from my perspective, I agree. I think that I like the use of Conveil as part of this as well. And I think not only looking at jobs, but other critical services and destination types, I think it would be an interesting conversation to think about what destination types might be most appropriate to include, maybe depending on where the BRT routes are, if they're kind of serving hospitals or healthcare type destinations or other critical services like that. So I'd be interested in that discussion and think that it's sort of echo Eric's comments that I think it's a great perspective to add on to the kind of prioritization framework that might be used when prioritizing BRT routes. So I think that's great. And that's something MassDOT's been doing a lot of work on as well. And we should coordinate. So we're doing some similar analyses for our statewide long range plan right now to try and look at accessibility and the state of accessibility across the state and thinking about tools like that. So just add that, but yep, go ahead, Tom.
I just want to kind of reiterate some of what Eric had to say. I think one of the key pieces here would be how this would play into how people are getting to jobs. I think that's a key piece of this. And, for an example, I know, here in Somerville, where a large employer is, because of redevelopment in Union Square, Royal White Laundry is, moving and, had hundreds of employees, and a lot of them were based here in Somerville. And, they may be moving to other areas in the Metro Boston area. We don't know exactly. The city's working with them right now, but one of the big concerns is how will our residents be able to get to those, to that, job employment center, and, even though there's a lot of transportation here, sometimes even though you might have to get between Somerville and Everett or Somerville and Medford or somewhere, it's difficult to do that. And so, if a part of this is really looking at, where those, those employment centers are and how people will in the inner core can get back and forth to these jobs, I think that would be a key piece of that I'd like to see out of this. So I'd be in support of that. And I know Boston with their Rufford Ave project, I know they were talking about this also, adding a piece of this to that project too. So it would be interesting to see how that would all tie in also.
Don? All right. So I don't see any other hands up, so I think we can move on to the next one, Srileka.
And so the last project in the transit category is funding free fares, possibilities of eliminating fares with value capture. This is also a staff originated study, and it aims to use the value capture methodology to assess the possibility or the viability of eliminating fares on transit routes across the region. So again, I will ask Paul Christner if he can speak a little bit more on the goals of this project.
Yeah, I think this was proposed because we're, obviously the Boston is piloting a couple routes. I think, and there's a lot of there's RTAs that have done this around the region as well and around the state. And I think, to be clear, this isn't taking any kind of stand on free fares one way or the other. This is, looking at what would happen if that were expanded and how would we replace that revenue, because understanding that, there's a large chunk of revenue that would be not available without fares, particularly in the MBTA's case. And it would be looking about how to recapture that revenue through value capture and other methodologies. So, I think they're talking about, sales tax, property assessments, and other methodologies to do that. Transit-oriented development. And I believe MEPC, yes, there's a study there. It's mentioned in the summary here, use of value capture for transportation and TOD. So building on some of the things there, and sort of coming up with a methodology or a way to replace that revenue if it were to come to pass. And is there a budget slide? I forget. I think it's, yes, $60,000 was the budget. Data set documenting survey responses and a memorandum or webpage presenting the analysis on how this would be done. And the data will be made available to agency partners and municipalities throughout the region. Happy to discuss and take any questions.
So first quick question, so the survey responses, could you just explain what the survey is intended to be about and to who it would go to? I don't know if I saw anything about that.
I may. Sorry, I'm just trying to look into this on the description.
Okay.
I may have to get back to you on the survey.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yep. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Yeah, I was just curious because I don't remember seeing it in like the write-up. So yeah, we can talk offline about that one. But
yeah, I'm assuming there'll be some research portion and maybe talking to different municipalities around the region and kind of surveying folks on their feelings about it and what the possibilities were, but I'd have to look into it a little more closely.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, David.
Yeah, so I think this could be a really good region-wide study, and I think it's really timely, right? Especially for buses. Maybe only for buses. Maybe I'm only thinking about this as not for the whole transit system, but just for buses or maybe the ride. We just mentioned the bus network redesign, right, in the last study, and we're in the middle of it, and I think we're just about to get into a very, very vocal public process as soon as they release the maps finally of what the proposal is, and think about, if we do have free buses, where would they be? Where would they be in the region? And of course, we have Boston really taking the lead and running some free buses, and it was of course part of the whole mayoral race in Boston. And then we also have fair transformation, right? And this whole move to cash-free boardings and all the technology and all the cost of putting all that on the buses and all the kiosks that are going to be having to be put on the streets and all over the place in different places for cash-free boardings. So I don't know. And then we have congestion that's back now, and different construction projects, different big construction projects that are about to happen. So I don't know. I'm not sure where else this is being studied, but I think it would be great to get whatever information we can. It's pretty limited. It's a huge idea with a tiny little budget, but it's very specific in terms of what's being studied. I'd be interested to know, is this being studied anywhere else in some other broader way?
Thanks, David. Eric.
Yeah, thank you. I have a lot of thoughts about this. Yeah, we over the years at MAPC, we've been really interested in evaluating this concept of sort of value capture and looking at what other states and regions and honestly what other countries do across the world. And I think that there's a lot of different sort of ideas wrapped up in what the concept of value capture is. I think like one of the lessons we've learned is that when it comes to development projects, commercial housing, mixed use development projects, there's a lot of value that cities and towns, mostly cities and towns, are kind of already capturing in those projects. Whether it be, we do, like, inclusionary zoning is something where, requiring affordable housing to be built with is not something a lot of places across the country do. And so that's something that we do that many places don't. And that's actually, in some ways, that's like a form of value capture, where we're requiring developers to basically not get the most amount of money they can for like a housing site, and put that into affordable housing. So there's a lot of sort of complexity that's wound up in here. I think overall the concept of trying to understand how we could support like fair equity broadly, and I think David's point about even thinking about this is with respect to free buses or the funding of a low income fare or something like that, I think is really interesting. Interrogating that some more. I think the way that we would need to go about this would be, very thoughtful. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I'm sort of on the fence of whether this is like a useful, body of work to do compared to some of the other things, but would definitely want to be involved in it. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. So that, very, very interesting idea. But there's a lot of complexity in here about like what is value capture and sort of what are things that cities, what's the value that cities and towns are kind of already getting, and is there something left to be had that isn't a trade-off with other issues.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, Daniel.
Thanks. Yeah, one of I left my hand up. I think I've sort of answered my own question, but I was trying to remember what value capture is. So I think I've gathered here, and with what Eric was just saying, I think that was helpful too. But I think that that making sure that's clear, because it's not a concept that I encounter that often. I guess I would sort of going to maybe one of Eric's points about inclusionary zoning and that sort of value capture. I guess I wonder if they're, if we're talking about sort of the increased value of places near transit, like one thing that raises a question, again, related to housing, is the extent to which just sort of thinking about that having be closer to transit being more valuable but being more expensive, and sort of how that does work against affordability in a way. Like I just sort of trying to understand that. Maybe that's sort of outside of the scope of what this is looking at, but that's sort of what it made me start to think about. So anyway, I don't know. Those are just some of the things I'm wrestling with a little bit with this, but trying to understand like what the mechanism of this would be, I think is a little, what I'm trying to understand also, this is a little confusing. So maybe I just need to read it a bit more. Thanks.
We're happy to talk to you more, Daniel, if this were to go forward and start thinking about what some of those things mean more specifically. If that's helpful.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I agree that I think there's room for this one to maybe be shaped and think about tie-ins to affordable housing and policy and things like that. But we could, flesh that out a bit more. But go ahead, Len.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, I support this one. I think the appeal to me is that it can really influence policy, and I think we can use this information when going to our legislators and asking them to support these kinds of initiatives more. And I think working with MAPC would be a great way to help us reach out beyond the MPO board and to a bigger audience that would support free fares or at least or extremely discounted fares. And what I was trying to answer to myself was, why wouldn't I say in this case that it'd be nicer if someone else paid for it? I really do think this is one that because of the scope of it and the appeal to, like I said, the legislators potentially, it would be good for us to do it. So I'm very supportive of this. Thank you.
Excellent. Laura.
Hi again. So I think this is one that would be helpful to have some further conversations about to shape. I feel like I'm probably too new here to make, specific suggestions at this point, but I think it would be helpful to have some follow-up conversations with staff at the T just to talk a little bit more about this and understand and, try to shape how it could be valuable, most valuable if it was to move forward. I also just did want to kind of summarize something that I was hearing in this conversation, which was some interest from this group in, if this was to move forward, understanding how value capture could be useful for funding transit or funding, and I heard also tie into affordable housing. So, it sounds like this group may have a slightly broader interest in understanding the role of value capture than just what's written on the screen, but would love to continue the conversation.
Thanks, Laura. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. A couple of things pop up on this is in just what Laura was just speaking to about. I think I'd want to get a better handle on when we're talking about value capture, is to almost like, I'm all about details, and the devil's the devil's in the details, right, on all these items. And if we can kind of scope out, how this would really work, because you tie into the affordable housing to it, and again, like Eric said, some communities don't do anything, others do a lot. Some of them, we already have a lot in place. We have a 20% piece to all developments. We have linkage fees. We have job creation and training fees. The list goes on and on. So, so I'd want to really understand, that piece of it, because, at the end of the day, I'm trying to figure out how, I think I like the idea of this, but again, the scope and the details are key on this. But I'd also like to figure out, how would the T react to this? How would they be funded? Because, we know they're underfunded now, right? A negative report came out about safety. I was reading it, yesterday in the Globe, and it's like, we have to be careful here to figure out, whatever revenue was lost by doing this, how is it going to be made up? Where does that money come from? And then to speak to Len's comment, I thought I heard earlier that we wouldn't be advocating one way or the other on this. We would just be kind of digging into the facts and reporting back what we found. So but it sounded like Len was talking about that we may be doing this to kind of advocate for, free fares. And I just want to be clear on what our role would be on this. Right now, I think it's more fact finding and trying to do a report that would just be based on facts. So if this happens, this is the result, So I just want to be kind of clear on that, but I think this definitely needs a little bit more work on it to get a better idea is exactly what we're looking to get out of this.
Yeah, Tom, this project would not, in the way we wrote it up, would not be taking a position on free fares. It would be more on the fact finding side. I mean, that's the way we envisioned it.
That's what I thought I heard earlier. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that at this point.
Thank you. So see, Tom O'Rourke, maybe you have the last comment, and then I know we still have 4 more studies to get through. So I think we wanted to talk a little bit about maybe meeting next week as well. So save a minute at the end for that, but go ahead, Tom.
All right, thank you. Yeah, just briefly to follow up on Tom's comments too. I think it sounds like to me that the results we're looking for here are a report that are going to tell us how much of an additional tax we're going to be putting on businesses that happen to be located near the T, so that others who happen to use the T don't have to pay for it. Is that kind of what we're getting at?
I don't know if I would frame it exactly that way, but it's looking at if free fares were to happen, yes, how would we fund them, and how would that work through value capture, which is, looking at places located near the T and how that would happen.
Thanks.
Yeah, Laura.
So I know we're getting close to the end of our time here, so I just wanted to kind of ask the backing up question as the new person in the room about where are you all in this process? What would the process be to shape some of these ideas or continue to talk about them going forward?
So right now we are still taking in feedback from this committee, of course. And the next steps, once we are sort of through discussing these initial ideas, is to, I suppose, survey this committee and staff and really start that ranking process of deciding which projects we are going to pursue to put in the final universe. I do think, though, that there is still time to refine scopes because this is sort of like the first look at these projects. So if they ultimately get selected, there will be a lot more work put into developing out these ideas and budgets in a way that's much more sort of focused on the feedback that we're getting. So this is definitely an initial step, and there is still time to provide feedback. On that subject, I'll pass it over to Derek to discuss sort of scheduling another meeting to finish talking about this, because I think we have about 4 studies left to go through.
Yeah, I think the original next meeting date would be May 26th, the day of the next MPO meeting, but because there's still 4 more to get through, and I think maybe some comments on the existing ones, it would be beneficial to meet next week as well. So I know there's a A&F committee at 9 a.m. on this on May 19th, but if folks are generally available or could be available on the 19th at 10 a.m., I think that would be our proposal to maybe hold an additional meeting then. Is there any like, I guess, significant opposition to that? Otherwise, we can send around the details this week.
What time was that again, Derek?
10 a.m. on the 19th.
Because we're not having an MPO meeting on the 19th.
That's correct. Yeah, the next one is May 26th.
Yeah, that's great. That works. I have that time blocked already.
Okay. Great. So yeah, I think we can plan on that then. And if folks have comments, they can send them to you, Streetlight, right, on existing draft scopes, and we'll plan on that. So thanks, everybody. Good discussion today, and we'll see you all next week. I guess I have to ask for a motion. Is there a motion and second to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, any abstentions? All right. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Aye.
Have a good day.
Aye.